Rick Higgins with you here again. In Volume 1, you've already learned how to do the general maintenance on your Volkswagen, so now you're ready to move on to some things that will make you feel like a real Volkswagen mechanic. What we're going to do this time, we're going to take the motor out of the car, then we're going to learn to do all the clutch-related things. So by the time you get done here, you'll know all about clutches. Then we're going to put the motor back into the car. When we get done with this, you'll be ready to move on to Volume 3, where we're going to do a complete engine overhaul. So let's get started. Now that you've moved on to bigger things, you're going to need a bigger jack. The little jack we used before when we were changing our oil is just too small for pulling the motor. For one thing, it won't lift the car high enough to get the motor out from underneath the car. Another thing, it's just plain too unstable. The motor could fall off the jack and cause an injury. Another thing, we want to have safety-approved jack stands. You never want to use cement blocks or something that could fall. Okay, now we just start taking things loose from the motor. First thing we'll start with is the heat pipes. Fortunately, these don't have any clamps on them. If they did, you'd have to take the clamps loose first. These particular wires here are fastened with 8mm nuts. Sometimes you have to take the whole nut off like this and put on your wires. There's our coil wire. There's our oil pressure wire. Stick it on there. The ends of these wires, again, are not very good shape, so now's the time to replace those too before you put the motor back in. Older cars will have a screw right here holding that in there. The newer ones, it'll be an 8mm nut. Okay, loosen that up right there. Now we're ready to go down under the car, but before we go under there, we want to take some tools with us. Okay, one of the wrenches you're going to need for sure is the 17mm box-in wrench to take the bottom nuts off. A pair of vice grips to clamp real tight and then pull them right on out of there. Now we'll clip off the fuel line. Okay, once we get our gas line clipped off, let it right down out of there. Now right at this point, you want to make sure that your generator is not hitting the back of your car or hitting your rubber and getting caught up in it. So you'll want to tip it right up along the side of the flywheel, lock it into the teeth. That keeps the flywheel from turning as you're loosening these bolts that hold the clutch on. Then you take your ratchet, 13mm socket. Now if your clutch has been chattering or not operating smoothly, you could have a problem with your pressure plate. This is the pressure plate, sometimes called a clutch cover. So you'll want to examine it to see if you've got any broken springs inside here, if there's a nut off here, something might be broken, if the faceplate's loose up in here. Could be an indication that you've got a problem with it, you'll want to replace it. Another thing you can do is examine it to see if it's warped. Lay something flat on top of that faceplate, move it around and see if it's level on there. The rigid type clutch disc looks like this. There's no springs in it. Usually they're a little cheaper. In fact, this clutch disc here is out of the older 40-horse Volkswagen. You can see there's a difference in the size of it. This is the 180mm clutch. This is the 200mm clutch. We'll show you those differences in the flywheel in just a little bit too. And there's the old style clutch, much smaller than the other one. See, there's the old one. There's the new type. This throwout bearing has to be used with this clutch. And these clutches are not interchangeable with each other. But it could be the finger type or it could be the diaphragm type here. The clutch disc. Now I'll show you in this old dune buggy motor what excessive rear main bearing wear looks like. So you pull up and down on the flywheel here, pull up on it. It makes that knocking noise. You can see it moving like that. Then that rear main bearing is so worn that a new seal would never hold in there. The first thing we'll look at is this surface on the back side of the flywheel where the seal rides. That needs to be perfectly smooth so that seal can do its job. This one's good. Now I'll show you a bad one. I hope you can see this on the flywheel here. This flywheel has a groove in it, right where the seal's been riding. Probably the seal's been in there for a long time. Maybe the edge of it got hard and it's cut a groove. Now at this point I want to emphasize that this tube needs to have a bend in it. It needs to be at least a ½ inch of bend in the tube here. This one's got more than that, but that's all right too. If it doesn't have any bend in it, then you can add washers to the end of it before it goes in. Now as you can see here, the older transmission mount bolts between the transmission and a bracket that's bolted to the chassis. Now the newer one bolts on a little bit differently, but the procedure for replacing it is pretty much the same as the old one. We'll be doing the older one. I'll show you how to do that right now. And we take our other bolt out. And we can take that bracket right on out of there now. Now we take the old mounts off and put our new mounts on and bolt them on tightly. Okay, now we're finally ready to put our motor back in. So let's just slide it on under there. Now we get our engine lined up with our transmission underneath the car, and then we slide our jack back up underneath our motor. Okay, now I'm going to jack it up a little bit. Now we'll just go back underneath the car, and basically we'll just be doing everything we did. We took the motor out, just in reverse order. I'm going to take our tools with us, take the nuts to hold it in with, take our connector, and we'll crawl back underneath here and hook it all back up. And then we put our air cleaner back on, hook up our heater pipes. Now you put your battery cable back on, and you're done. Well, it's time to bring to a close volume number 2. But now that you know how to pull your motor out of your car, you're ready to move on to the next step, and we'll show you how to overhaul your motor in volume 3. We'll see you then.